think it's about time we talk about the Keep and what choices will carry over into Dragon Age the Veilguard. Because there's not that many. There's 3. But I think some much-needed context is necessary. Thanks to IGN's interview with BioWare not too long ago, we have official word what choices are coming to Veilguard. If you haven't seen it, let's review. Other than the lineage of the Inquisitor, there lies only 3 choices you can pick from: who they romanced, the fate of the Inquisition, if they disbanded or continued under the Chantry, and if the Inquisitor vowed to stop Solus or will make the attempt to redeem him. This is also what I saw at the event last month. Admittedly, I was told this was not the final version, so I originally opted not to share. That said, I think it's fair to say it's a little bit disappointing. There are several decisions that we made over the course of all 3 games, and only 3? That's it? Well, at first glance, after taking some considerable time to dwell over this and look through, it painfully makes sense. More specifically, this was the best case scenario. Let me explain. Actually, before we get started, a note. If you don't know, I have played Veilguard. Not all of it, but a big chunk of Act 1 and a smidge of Act 2, as part of the Community Council, as well as one who attended last month's Veilguard preview event. So while what I'm about to say is technically theory crafting and educated guessing, it's based on the foundation of having that context for the actual game. And don't worry, I'm not going to spoil main events in the game. That's for later. Again, let's start. Dragon Age has had a lingering problem that's plagued them since its origins: quantum characters. Quantum characters are those who have multiple permutations, a number of outcomes, based on the player's gameplay decisions. Alistair stays as a warden or becomes a king or a drunk. Morrigan can become a mother, and Anders, Bethany, Carver, Blackwall, Loghain, Iron Bull, Stan, and Zevran can all either live or die. Same with Liliana, even though she does become a kind of lyrium ghost. The presence of quantum characters can overcomplicate storytelling. In Dragon Age's case, where players can play Origins, 2, Inquisition, or any combination of the 3, it can chain down progression altogether. Any effort and or manpower to make the references or cameos may be as grand as a physical appearance or as simple as a codex entry. Recently, there was very strong sentiment that those simple references made all the difference. That even a character saying 6 words about a player's previous paramour was worth its weight in resources. And yet, there was also a time not too long ago when players were infuriated that their favorite was distilled into a codex entry. No matter what the case, you're bound to offend someone. Regardless of references, something not dwelled on enough is that even if your protagonist has made certain decisions, that does not exempt other characters from having the agency to go on their own path. Despite the quantum characters, there are immutable, constant events. The world will shift one way or another, regardless of our input. The Archdemon dies, Anders blows up the Chantry, Corypheus is always defeated. These are canon events. We cannot interfere. Because the choices we make aren't always guaranteed to have a lasting impression, how are we to know if Fainrio, if freed and sent to Deventer, would have any world-changing effects? He was an above-average mage, a dreamer, and may have died from angering his Magister Master. Cassandra had a love interest named Galleon. Great guy, great story. He died right before the beginning of Inquisition. In fiction, lives are simple to take away. So how do you make every permutation matter? That the player's choice did, in fact, matter? Well, the dev answer is that they did. Because honestly, they did. Your canon exists, and a large number of choices made in Origins and 2 did reach conclusion by the end of Inquisition. The Mage and Templar conflict, most notably, and its recovery and restoration efforts would take years, maybe decades, to complete. And Trespasser extended several of the stories to completion with epilogue slides for all companions and advisors. Some retired, some have new lives, and others are dead. Unless you bring them back out through the Inquisitor's romance, what does Southern Thedas have to do with Northern Thedas? Why would they be there in the first place? I know some of you are going to say Dorian, but that's for later. On the timeline of Dragon Age, who is to say that the effects of a changed or reformed Southern Thedas would actually make headway by the time that Veilguard begins? And who's to say that we can't import decisions along the way? Something like Knights of the Old Republic 2, where you can correct an NPC regarding the truth behind Revan's identity based on your own playthrough. Or perhaps other decisions are not presently needed until a possible DLC or in Dragon Age 5. Even more, there actually lies a more important question here. A greater dilemma. If bound by the chains of the past, how do you create a path forward? An answer to that is keeping it simple and spry. Forcing the importance of certain events, but not discrediting the old ones in case it can be brought up later. It's not an elegant solution, but it is a solution. And it has some merit if you look closer into the roots of Dragon Age's decision trees. The fate of the Inquisition seems simple enough. Disband or join the Chantry. But the choice is actually a web of its own with multiple moving parts. First is the nature of the Inquisitor in Thedas. Throughout the events of Trespasser, the Inquisitor was turned into a very public, very politicized figure. If the Inquisition was absorbed by the Chantry, they cannot move freely. Any action they take is an action on behalf of the Chantry, and would threaten another holy war in a given nation. If the Inquisition is disbanded, well, that's certainly easier to handle, no one to report to, but again, no resources to rely on. Most importantly, the Inquisitor is a known walking target. They cannot walk where Solus runs. It's likely that the Inquisitor would not be directly involved with physically finding Solus, and made evident in the comics, where other companions like Varric and Harding moved on behalf of what's left of the Inquisition. 'Cause the Inquisitor can't do anything. Everyone knows their face, and the missing arm doesn't help. So while their objective remains stopping or saving Solus from himself, this does not always mean a knife against his throat, no matter how many of us would like to see it. It is a bit strange how in the character creator we cannot choose if the Inquisitor is a mage, rogue, or warrior, but like I said, for the Inquisitor, a public military figure, taking up arms would be a major political crisis. The second part are the romances. I actually think this will be very confusing for some of the players who haven't played in a while, or most likely who haven't played the Trespasser DLC. If made divine, Cassandra and the Inquisitor are no longer in a public relationship. But if you romance her, well, you romanced her. From the latest version of the Keep choices, Veilguard does not outwardly account for this circumstance as of yet. So how does the continuation of a romance take place, or is referenced to, if one has done so? She can be the head of the Seekers, or a literal divine. As an aside, Blackwall is just as confusing, since you can romance him, however he can be later judged post-coital scene and sentenced. The others make sense. Iron Bull's romance can only be actualized if you save the Chargers, and he becomes Talvashoth. Sarah doesn't have any quantic effects for her romance, neither does Cullen, Josephine, or Dorian. Solus is the most straightforward, and even the decision for the Inquisitor to not have Valesline can actually be tallied through removing the Valesline when remaking the Inquisitor at the start. And it's because of the Valesline, I believe certain choices are baked in. Not only because it directs the narrative better for the sake of Rook's story, but also because it makes it easier for players who have not played certain DLCs or content. For instance, the Descent DLC. Not everyone played the Descent DLC. Not everyone has seen or has been explained to the depth of Titan magic. Honestly, even after playing that DLC, the fandom hasn't exactly agreed on the same takeaways, which is why we're experiencing it technically for the first time as Rook. Through Harding. You can arrive at the same conclusion through different paths. Having lore explained to you about what happened in the past can be boring. Storytelling-wise, it's much more thrilling to recreate the discovery firsthand. And the implications and meanings can go much deeper when it's happening before your very eyes, to your own companion. I mentioned an Inquisitor possibly not having Valesline if romancing Solus. That choice is baked in as well. It shouldn't need a ticker at the front if accounted for in the character creator. And would be a weird conversation to bring up again. You'd think? A reunion between the two would have something more interesting to speak of, tearing the veil and all. As far as the other choices that may have been baked into the game, sometimes, no matter how beloved a character, there always lies the possibility of external factors prohibiting their return. I'm not here to sift through old drama, but it is what it is. But why not the Well of Sorrows? Okay, as a preface, I do think this is a bit of a loss to not be able to choose. And think it's a strange challenge for BioWare to take on, to not only include such a weighted decision in the last game. But let's play devil's advocate for a little bit. It does not matter who drank from the well. Why? Well, was this a philosophical choice or a practical one? Because two things happen here when the Inquisitor or Morrigan are bound to the Well of Sorrows. One, they gain the capacity to understand Old Elven tongue and Mythal's fellow servants. Okay, cool. And two, they are bound to Mythal's will. Mythal can literally control whomever drank the well. Morrigan drinking from the well provides the added ability to shapeshift as a dragon, but as we know from previous games, she's had the ability to shapeshift this entire time.
Just who is your mother?
Mother is the inheritor. She who waits the next stage.
With or without the well, Morrigan is bound to see the end of this tale, one way or another. Now, here's the thing. Mythal's essence had been absorbed by Solus. So what are the consequences here? Either Solus now possesses the gas and is able to control the Inquisitor or Morrigan, or such possession has been completely nullified because the person behind the chains is not Mythal. I'm inclined to lead on the latter, solely because the former choice would mean that Solus would have the control over another person, a power he tried to rid from the elven gods before. For him to use such power, it would be devastatingly out of character. He is a man who may kill, sure, but he does not do so aimlessly. To control another person, the Inquisitor, Morrigan, whomever, it's against his nature, and counter to what he fought for in the first place. So, the well becomes redundant outside of either the Inquisitor or Morrigan knowing how to translate and understand Elven. Helpful, but as neither are with us on an active basis, this can be written around. Veilguard's story moves at a heightened velocity. And while you do have moments of peace to get your bearings and understand the world around you, more often than not, you are drafted into the action and need to answer the call. It may not make sense now, but having only a few choices at the start be accounted for helps the player understand Rook. You have much to do and much to answer for, to the point where trying to account for decisions of the past would not make one bit of sense in Rook's story. There's a little bit of isolationism when it comes to Rook's story, but it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. Southern Thedas needs time to handle its recovery. Tevinter has its own divine, while in the midst of a war with the Qunari. It's not that you're isolated from your choices that you've made in the past, it's that you are thrust into a completely new mess. This mess, which must be handled promptly. If the game desires context for the hero of Freldon or Hawk based on the game's asking, a potential DLC could just ask you about it. And I suppose Dragon Age 5 could do exactly just this. Whether either is in the pipeline, only EA and BioWare know. For me, I am waiting until the game comes out. I recognize I am privileged because I know how the game plays out. You are so invested in your own story that there is little time or precedence for you to sit down and say, okay, tell me about your past life. The game is shoving you along. Rook is literally a piece on a chessboard trying to knock everything out of the way. Both the good and problematic part of the personality, but we'll get to that eventually. This is my own take. I don't want to put that much coloring on it, but look. At some point, someone said, look, we either accommodate for every single possible permutation and run out of budget and have a weak narrative wrapped in references that confuse the hell out of new players, or we choose what matters, write a strong and compelling story, and ship the game. And that's why I think we've landed at 3 choices from Inquisition. Do I like it? No. No. But does it make sense? reluctantly, yes. Yes, it does. Thank you for watching. A little bit of upkeep before I wrap this up. If you're looking for the latest news on Dragon Age the Veilguard, that's not me. I strongly suggest Kyle Elizabeth and Katie, or Gil Dothelin, and more in the description. They are faster than me and are fantastic at it, and I have so much appreciation for both of them, as well as the others in the community. I said this before on social, but I'm not going to do Dragon Age news like I did before. Zero interest in that. I'm here to do commentary. How Dragon Age is, why it is, and where it's going. If you remember my old stuff, I was a theory person. That's what I love doing. And when Bioware unleashes me, I will talk about the companions at length, because that's what I love Dragon Age for. Characters and stories. And that's what I'm here for. So if you're here, I love your face. I'll be back for more later. See you soon, and defend it out and unsell.